Right, I'll just do that again.
You think?
Hey, I got this gig at 2 hours notice, okay? Hello and welcome to The Cine Skinny, the film podcast from the people behind the Skinny magazine. We're back at EHFM. Thank you to Jamie Pettinger and the station for having us again. Be sure to listen to EHFM at ehfm.live. It truly is the best radio station.
Yeah,
basically, all the cool people I know seem to have shows there. Just cool guys. I should say for regular listeners who may be confused, my name is Jamie Dunn. I'm sitting in for Peter Simpson, who is unfortunately not too well today, so he had to cancel hosting today. So Peter, please get well soon. But I am joined, as ever, by Annie Burrows.
Hello.
Annie, I believe you were patient zero in this plague that's sweeping the office.
Editor-in-chief was patient zero.
Okay.
I think she was ill first, then I got ill, then I gave it to someone else, who I think then gave it to Peter.
You're the super spreader.
Though I was sitting next to our editor-in-chief the day before
she got
either of us got ill. So I don't know where it came from.
So you could be patient zero.
It could be.
Yeah.
It was possible. I mean, I'd been at the Young Fathers at the Barrowlands right before.
Yeah.
So
essentially, if you meet someone from the Skinny in the street, avoid them at all costs.
Yeah. We're spreading something. And it's like a weird something. I felt like dizzy. Like I thought I had long COVID because I was like, I felt really stoned.
Like, I mean, you may have just been stoned.
I may have just been stoned, but I don't think I was. I don't remember doing it. I think I just felt like really like not with it, like really lightheaded, like very strange, a really strange illness. I think we have incubated, kind of like with COVID and the bat. I think we are the bat.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, look forward to that. And I am joined by Ellie Robertson. Hi, Ellie.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm okay. I'm better now. So
That's good. See, there is an end to the tunnel. You come out the other side feeling healthy and stronger.
Totally.
You know, if it doesn't kill us, it makes us
I'm
stronger.
now paranoid though, so I've started wearing masks again. Like I wear masks on buses and subways now, just because I'm like, last winter I was just ill all the time because I think that no matter what, everyone's immunity is down. So now I'm like, I'm gonna be a mask queen.
Mask queen, yeah, baby.
Go for it. Yeah. So okay, shall we make a podcast, guys?
Yes.
Okay. On today's show, we're going to delve into Saltburn, the new film from promising young women director Emerald Fennell. We also check out Tish, a documentary about photographer Tish Murtha from Paul Sng. And in honour of our favourite little freak, Barry Keoghan, who stars in Saltburn as a chaotic figure, and let's face it, he's a horny little chaotic figure in all of his films. We're going to be celebrating Barry and talking about our favourite horny figures in cinema. It's a very loose theme. I don't know how this is going to work. As you can tell, it probably wasn't thought out that well.
We discussed this numerous times, and we still decided to go for it.
But nobody knows exactly what it means. So.
No. There was like a conversation earlier where Ellie was like, "How are we defining horny little freak?" I was like, "Fucking hell!" Because like doing a PhD.
I have not seen Saltburn, so I was kind of like, I can't go off of how horny a little freak Barry Keoghan is in this film because I don't really know. I don't know if it's horny like. I don't know, like Shakespeare horny or horny like, I don't know.
It's like his usual brand of horny. I think if you've seen a Barry Keoghan film, then I think, like, okay, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I've brought something that's not that, so it'll be fun. We'll get there.
Okay.
Diversity.
We're going to be talking about something. We'll see. But yeah, so first we're going to head back to the halcyon days of 2006 when adults were reading Harry Potter and Indie Sleaze was on the radio. The film, as I mentioned, was directed by Emerald Fennell, who made the divisive rape revenge film Promising Young Women. And here she's telling the tale of privilege and desire centred on Skinny's favourite, Barry Keoghan, who is Oliver Quick, a lowly working class kid from Merseyside who's completely out of his depth among the extremely privileged classmates at his first year at Oxford University. He's a bit of an outcast until he's taken under the wing of an incredibly charming and handsome aristocrat called Felix, who's played by Jacob Elordi. Felix and Oliver become fast friends, and this bromance intensifies when Felix invites Oliver to spend the summer holidays at Saltburn, his huge ancestral home. Not ancestral home, ancestral home. My God, how does Pierre do this? How do other people do this?
Could we not cut any of this?
Please. Okay. Here, Oliver meets Felix's eccentric family, who includes Richard E. Grant as his dotty dad, Rosamund Pike as his deliciously awful ex-model mother, and Alison Oliver as Felix's troubled younger sister. Anahit. I got to the end of that, my God. That was tough. You went to Oxford.
I did. Jesus.
You probably went to Oxford not long after this is set.
Yeah.
So
in
you
2009.
Yeah, so you could have been in this film, basically. You could have been
I am Rosamund Pike. Actually.
What do you think?
Yeah, so this film does not have like an original bone in its body. I'm gonna like start off there. It is Brideshead Revisited for the kids that like take care and listen to the Kinks. Is it the Kinks? Do I mean the Kinks? The Kooks.
The Kooks.
The Kooks. Remember the Kooks? Wow, they were great. It's like very kind of building on a lot of the ideas around Brideshead Revisited, on the talented Mr. Ripley. It's like plundering them with absolutely no fucking shame whatsoever. I think the thing with like how Emerald Fennell Cinema is talked about is as if it is original and as if it is groundbreaking. And I am actually slightly grateful to this film because it shows that it's actually just not. Like there is nothing groundbreaking in any of this, but it is kind of like a put together and fun time. It is deliriously camp. It is so over the top and stupid. The performances are really good, I think, because she has like curated loads of like really good people in it. And I will say the thing that I find really not interesting, but a saving grace in Emerald Fennell, like the way that she kind of makes films, is she is very, very good at paying attention to like little details in films. So in Promising Young Woman, one of the things that I really liked was the way that she kind of cast all of these old like sitcom actors that we kind of think of as these nice guys only to show they're complete like dickheads. And in this there are like certain scenes that are just so like out there and weird and kind of show like at least that this has a little bit of personality behind it. I am thinking of the scene where Barry Keoghan does something in the bathtub. I'm not going to say what, but it is definitely something. Also the scene where he like goes down on the girl. Like all of these, which he does it in a very specific way that I don't want to... Can you really spoil that scene? I don't know. Anyway, he does it in a particular way. And I think she's quite good at like creating a sort of like color or like narrative behind how she is talking about like quite actually well-trodden and trite themes and ideas. But like these little glimpses of how she does it feel like quite compelling, quite interesting. I did, for my sins, go to Oxford I guess it would have been, I started there in 2009. And I think a bugbear that I have with this kind of film, and I'm thinking also of that film that came out several years ago, The Riot Club. I don't know if you watched that. But it is kind of like a genre of cinema where people talk about how like fucking awful Oxford is. And like, sure, like no arguments there. I think arguably like most kind of like university institutions in the UK are, especially these days, like absolutely like immoral places. But there is a kind of way that we talk about like Oxbridge in the public imagination, which is so simplified that it actually loses all of its kind of political teeth. Like the problem with Oxford isn't that you have like these insane people who are like paying off other like poorer kids to like dance for them, and like that doesn't actually happen. Like the problem with it is that it's entrenching certain kind of quite insidious models of like class and economics from like a really, really young age into kind of our political and financial systems. Like that is the problem with it. And the way that these kind of films talk about it, I find really frustrating because it misses the point. And I think that kind of speaks to a much wider problem in this film particularly, where it is quote unquote kind of a film about class. But I actually can't think of a single thing that it's saying about class, except maybe that the rich are bad, but also actually not really. So maybe it's actually the people that are trying to social climb that are bad, except maybe not really that as well. So it just doesn't really say anything. And I think it's very interested in like the kind of extreme aesthetics of British class and how like awful it can be without actually thinking about any of the ways in which that operates. And that is something that I just find personally really frustrating. And I think made it a fundamentally incredibly silly film. But that's okay. Like I had a blast. Like I had a great time watching it. I would probably watch it again. I did not use a single brain cell while I watched it. Like it was nice. That was good. Like a recommendation. But that is all it is. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I found it hugely entertaining, often incredibly funny. Like Rosamund Pike, like
she's
every
great.
line she says is hilarious. It was so fun. It's so funny actually. It was one of these. I watched it at the GFT during the LFF screenings, And I just miss lots of dialogue because people were just creasing themselves. Like, it was a really funny film. Carey Mulligan has this little cameo as this, she's like this house guest who's overstayed her welcome, and she's just so funny. It's like she stepped out of Ab Fab. She's like a character who's just wandered into this show, and she's fantastic. Richard E. Grant's really good. I love the cast. I think the cast is doing incredible things. I think Barry Keoghan has never been better. He's like perfect actually in this role, and kind of surprising. Even though I'm saying it is a kind of typical Barry Keoghan role, he's playing this kind of like agent of chaos. He's actually doing things I've never seen him do before, and actually kind of ballsy in a way that a lot of actors who claim to be ballsy aren't being ballsy. And I really enjoyed that aspect. But yeah, you're right. There's also the problem that, you know, Emerald Fennell is from this class, and she went to Oxford University at this time, and was definitely, you know, if we're talking, I don't know exactly how wealthy she is, but, you know, her dad was like a rich jeweler, if you wouldn't guess from a stupid name, you know, who's a jeweler who calls a kid Emerald? That seems weird to me. But anyway,
wow.
Like a builder who calls his son Brick.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so like I did think at first, oh, that's quite interesting. She's going to like take aim at her own class and sort of like pull them down to size, and you think it's going to be like a takedown. But and a lot of the humour comes from the class and about how ridiculous this kind of brood is, and how clueless and how out of touch they are. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of affectionate towards them as well. Like I think actually we're meant to kind of like them. I do like them, especially Jacob. How do you say his name? Elordi. You know, he's like actually a very admirable figure. You know, he's like quite altruistic. You know, he's not. You think he's going to be the cliche. You know, the kind of jock, handsome jock who's horrible to everyone and is going to get his comeuppance. And actually, he's quite an admirable fellow, really. Like, in the whole scheme of things. And again, to go into why the politics of the film doesn't quite work, you'd have to spoil the film.
Yeah, 100%.
And we can't really do that. But yeah, I think it is a bit clueless about like her politics is just bad. I think it was bad in Promising Young Woman. I think it's bad here. I think you're right as well. She borrows a lot from a lot of stuff. And similarly in Promising Young Woman, she borrowed a lot of like rape revenge stuff, but she didn't seem to understand the genre she was working in. Yeah. She kind of like, I think she was trying to subvert it, but in some way became like less interesting than all the other films that she was trying to copy. And here she's copying a lot of films, but again, she's missing out what's great about The Talented Mr. Ripley is like actually Ripley's a really interesting, deep character who, in one hand, is completely amoral and evil, but on the other hand is actually incredibly likable and sympathetic. And it's that tension that makes that film so great. Like, I watched that film, and even though this character is horrible, I find him quite a tragic figure, and there's not that depth, despite the greatness of Barry Keoghan's performance. There's not that depth to his character. No. It's such a cipher. You don't really understand his motivations or why he's doing what he's doing. So I found, the lack of depth is what was frustrating for me. But you know, saying that, the film is full of like delightful stuff, like great images. I agree that some of the stuff you pointed out was great. There's also a scene with a grave, which is very memorable. You know, but there's a lot of scenes which are also just like look like an advert. You know, it's like you know, them getting drunk at parties or playing tennis in like full tuxedos, while you know MGMT and people like that play on the soundtrack. You know, it looks great and it sounds great, but you know, it's not exactly saying much. Yeah. So
it's really interesting, and that you called it like an aesthetic film, which, I mean, I wonder if that's really what it is, because again, I've not seen this film. I've only seen it based off of the trailers. But yeah, it very much looks like Emerald Fennell wants to get away from the sort of trappings of Promising Young Woman, wherein things are very like grounded in a very dark and real story with real issues, and wants instead to fuck off to this like uncontroversial film where it's just eccentrically dressed whimsical characters that allow actors to do interesting roles they wouldn't normally be allowed to do, and her only point of reference for where weird people are in these insane institutions. Like, that's my leading theory about what's going on with this film, not having seen it, mind you.
But yeah, it is this kind of, it's really similar actually, I think, to what TV shows like Gossip Girl did, right? Where you are kind of critiquing these people by showing like their excesses and the aesthetic of their excesses, but actually you just make it look kind of cool and desirable in a way that feels quite different from what someone, for example, like Sofia Coppola does, where she is dealing again a lot with like aesthetics, but it is to kind of dismantle how do kind of aesthetics work in like a gendered way, and how do they kind of like trap women and girls within like certain environments. Whereas this is just like, yeah, it's kind of sexy and fun, but not really. They throw this party that looks genuinely sick, and it's meant to be this like disgusting display of wealth, but it just looks kind of fun. Very similar actually to, I think, what the Baz Luhrmann Great Gatsby did as well, where it just didn't quite understand it. And I think like what you said about like Jacob Elordi actually being really likable, I think is, yeah, actually not the problem with the film, not that they need to be unlikable, but it reminded me a lot of that kind of line in The Great Gatsby, like in the book, where it kind of talks about how like they were careless people. And I think that is what these kids are. Like, it's not that they're like out and out like evil in some ways, it's just that they're like thoughtless towards other people, and they can just like be mean to you, and they're just kind of bullies in a way. They won't like ask you to sit with them, they're really shitty. And what The Great Gatsby did was it kind of deconstructed how that was actually like a kind of moral failing, and how that had reverberations. Whereas in this, it kind of feels like she's saying like, oh, but that is kind of the worst thing that they do. And it's like, oh, I don't know if that really understands how any of this operates.
Yeah. And I think that one of the worst things, I mean, I think it actually is quite a good film, but there's things that she does are terrible towards the end. And it's just like, what it is a lack of confidence and a lack of subtlety. There's a moment where she like reveals some information where she doesn't really take the intelligence of the audience seriously. They think we've missed some obvious things. Like I think most people have worked out where the film is heading by like 3/4 of the way through, and she kind of hammers you over the head with what's happening. And it was interesting because I watched the film I watched straight after this, like a day later, was May December, which is another kind of camp, really enjoyable satire of a sort of a certain sort of type of person, like a kind of class. But it's like really much more morally interesting and nuanced, and it's
so subtle, that film, that is so like entangled and interesting.
Exactly. So it's just watching it side by side with a filmmaker who doesn't feel he has to tell you everything, and sort of lets the audience make up their mind about characters, whereas a director who really wants to tell you everything about the character and doesn't trust you to have your own opinion. I think that's just the difference. You know, it's like, yeah, you're right, it's like filmmaking on the surface. There's kind of no depth, no kind of like a it's not it's a film I might rewatch because it's funny, but it's not a film I'm going to rewatch to try and dig into it and understand more, you know.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I agree.
But it's a way, that might sound like a pan, but I would actually say go out and see this film because it's so fun.
Yeah, 100%. I probably will go again when it's in the cinema. Like, I kind of want to just like take some friends and be like, look, look at this. And in
a way, I also sound like I'm quite hard on Emma Farrell. I kind of like she's out there doing her own thing, and like, you know, maybe it's fine to be making stupid films that are entertaining.
I've always liked her in her acting roles. I think she's a very good actor.
Yeah.
What has she done aside from Barbie and Camilla Parker Bowles?
She was in Call the Midwife for like 3 seasons.
Oh, lovely.
And she's like a really good character. She's like, you know, got a little sort of like lesbian love plot line going on for a while, and she's like, I don't know, it's all like, her character's quite anti-colonial as well. Okay. But yeah, that's just another, like, that's a show that sort of scoops up really weird people like Jessica Raines or what's her face, I forget her name now, the lead from Ghosts, who's been in loads and loads of stuff recently, but like, and Judy Parfitt as well, like loads of like really interesting actors who kind of just appear on this show and talk about the 60s and pretend to be a nun or whatever, and then disappear, and they like don't get like a send-off or anything like that. They just go on to like become successful directors.
Okay, so that's a recommendation for both Saltburn and Call the Midwife.
100%, yeah.
And Emma Farrell as Camilla Parker Bowles, because she's like actually very funny.
She is funny as well. Yeah.
So yeah, Saltburn is released 17th November by Warner Brothers. Go see it. Okay, on to Tish. Tish is a documentary telling the story of Tish Murtha, who was a Tyneside photographer who used her camera to chronicle working class lives. A lot of her work focused on the communities around her in the northeast of England in the 70s and 80s. She also spent some time documenting the lives of sex workers in Soho in London, and generally she pushed back against Thatcherism and youth unemployment in 80s Britain. The film shows how Tish had success early in her career, but struggled to fit in with the middle-class art establishment and sustain her career as a photographer. In the film, we meet Ella, who's Tish's daughter, who's trying to get her mother more recognised. And on the soundtrack, we hear Maxine Peake, who reads out Murtha's various letters, diary entries, and essays. Ellie, what do you think of this one?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, so this year we've had All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, and this is another documentary that really advocates for like the union between documentary cinema and photography. Like, it's a great way to just be exposed to the entire portfolio of a photographer, especially one that you might never even heard of, whilst also having this like very inquisitive nature that's great for exploring the background and the style and the subjectivity of the photographer. And the fact that it's a family member as well that's investigating this, it's very stories we tell. So I enjoyed it immensely. Like, you know, I think that probably the biggest difference between All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, which does have, you know, its 80s social realist thing, but then tethers that into a modern day crusade against the opioid crisis. The ending of Tish Murtha's story is like a lot more bleak. And I don't know the extent to which I can spoil it, but like, I mean, this is a rather underappreciated photographer, someone who was never appreciated in the course of her life. And, you know, the fact as well that her life ends with another 10 years of Tory austerity to go, when that's very clearly the very thing she's trying to fight back against. Yeah, it's like it's a pretty outrageous feeling that you're left with at the end of this film, but at the same time, I'm so glad that I was even given the chance to see this work that I never would have seen. Like, she does seem like a legend. She embraces this controversial nickname that she's given, the Demon Snapper, by her local community. When they notice that she's like, they have a problem with her photographing the military influence and slightly pedophilic undertones of the like local jazz bands, which is like a marching band thing. And there's a part where they're speaking to like an old professor of hers, and he says that her entry interview into the course was the shortest that he ever did. He said, "What do you want to photograph?" And she said, "Policemen kicking kids." And he said, "You're in." And it's like, what an icon. But like, I suppose the most interesting thing about it is that the way this is all pieced together. Like, not only do you have these really fun little interviews and the photography, but you have sort of little dramatic kind of reenactments, not like scenes or anything like that, but just sort of set dressing, usually accompanied by the narration of her diaries by Maxine Peake, which is like a really, really good presence to have in the film. But also, yeah, you quickly become, this is someone who is like very thoughtful about their craft, very like informed on the politics surrounding her community and the way she interacts with her community. And she's almost as proficient a writer as she is a photographer. There's like a little speech at one point where she says that the Labour government, like not only is she like, you know, decrying the Tories or whatever, but she says that like the Labour government have to be called upon to create a sustainable like home for socialism to thrive. And then she signs it off and it is like 1980 and you're like, oh my God, this is like the most prescient film ever. This is like straight out of what people are talking about now. And again, that is kind of like part of the tone of the film. It leaves you with this feeling of like the past is very much resembling the present, and it feels as if we've not made a lot of progress. But the presence of her daughter as this investigator into her life, who is like uplifting her art and her story, actually makes it really, really sweet and makes it a really, really enjoyable watch. So I did like this one. I liked like a good sort of very sensitive but also very informative documentary. And I'm finding that like photography really thrives when it's like conjoined with cinema.
Yeah, totally. Annie?
Yeah, I also surprisingly really liked it. In a way that I was also kind of surprised by, actually maybe less by All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, but I wasn't really familiar with Nan Goldin's work. And this I had never like heard of Tish Murtha before, so it felt like quite a, like how much are you going to connect to something that you don't really have like a context around. But I thought the way that it was made was mostly really beautiful. I really liked the emphasis on the photographs, and a lot of it is almost like a kind of montage with like a narration kind of set against it. And I think that is, because you're absolutely right, that kind of meld of like photography and cinema works really well. But I really like it when they allow the language of photography to continue to speak through cinema rather than kind of reconstituting it or whatever. There were a couple of points where it kind of has like almost a bit of a like slightly, not even melodramatic, but quite like emotionally laden, like reenactment-y kind of thing. And I didn't super love that, but I think that is just more a personal thing. I don't really like reenactments or whatever in documentaries, or kind of, you know, like that figure from the back that's like an actor but is meant to be the person. Like, it's just not my favorite way to like tell a story, but like it doesn't happen it's not definitely like the bulk of how the story is told. There was this one bit where they're talking to someone, can't remember who, but the daughter is interviewing someone and they're looking at this one particular photo. And I think the man says something like, it's just the kind of photo that you could only take if you were there for a long time. Like if you were sitting with this person for a long time, if you were both generally within that community, but also within that specific environment for like hours. And I thought that was actually just a really gorgeous way of thinking about a lot of these ideas around like class and community and how it kind of navigates them, in that it is about, the people that are there and the people that use these kind of like artistic methods or bring in something new to the community, but they are still incredibly embedded in their community. And it felt like that was what she did. And I think you can kind of see the legacy of that through her daughter, which again, that was something that I was not 100% sure of, like at the beginning of the film. It reminded me a little bit of, was it that polystyrene documentary where the daughter was also involved?
Well, this is the same director.
It is the same. Oh, okay. Well then, right. Okay, that goes to show. So yeah, like that same model of having like the daughter involved, and I think I felt like a little bit hesitant about like always telling like particularly female artists stories through this kind of family. But actually, the way that the daughter approaches it, she understands her mother's work so well, and she is angry about it. Like it's not just the kind of investigation of like, what was it like and tell me this, and like wanting to uphold her legacy. It is a continuation of her legacy in a lot of ways, of like the people that she talks to and the way that she talks to them. She has her own perspective and her own voice and things that she's like, no, that isn't acceptable. The ways that you were treated was like bad. And I actually thought that worked. It didn't feel like she was just like a conduit for her mother. It felt like she was kind of like continuing, or not continuing, the opposite of that. My brain is not working. Like her own kind of person, her own voice, which was really good. The Thatcher years obviously garbage, but then you do have like a little jump scare of like Tony Blair at the end, and you're like, fuck you.
Yeah, totally.
It's like so miserable because you like go through this hell, and then you see this man at the end, and you realize that was like the big fucking shift. Not to compare it to now, but it really is like, oh, great. Is this really what we have? And there is a kind of, not a pessimism, but I think there is a kind of resistance to catharsis in the film, which I thought was really interesting because of the way that her story ends, like quite sadly and bleakly, but then also like the political climate, like in hindsight, being like New Labour made things arguably also worse and maybe even.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, there's a clip, like you say, there's a clip where Tony Blair shows up, and it's him giving his like New Labour speech.
It's the education one, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I remember the line that he says is something about how like we need mothers who like want to go out and work instead of just like collecting their dole. And it's like, I think that this film is maybe a signal of a wider part of like complete historical like the fact that like people can look back on that and be like, this is a guy who's just standing in front of everyone and shouting about something that is obviously not the problem. It's so clear to us now, and the fact that we had this entire world built around trying to deal with this problem of like poor people don't want to work, and it's like that was never the problem. So it's very infuriating, and it's a very political film that is no doubt going to make you like turn to the person you're next to or whatever and start up a conversation afterwards. Yeah. But also, like, as much as a political film it is a cultural film. Like, we started talking about how, you know, the reason that you can't get, I mean, her photographs are just absolutely incredible, particularly in the like expressions that she captures on people's faces, whether they are like a couple who are sleeping rough but they're like cuddling up next to each other, or a guy at the pub who's laughing with like no teeth. And it's this thing of like, wow, it's a lot harder to capture. I mean, it was hard then, as you said, like we learned that she had a really professional approach to her craft where she sat with her subjects for a really long time. But it's even harder to get photos like that in this context, because I almost feel as if everyone knows how they're going to respond to a camera. Whereas we learn in the documentary that she grew up in, what was it, like the poorest square mile of Britain at that time, and like, you know, pilfered her camera from a derelict house, and everyone in her community would probably never have been photographed in their lives before, you know? So it's like people have very naturalistic ways of responding, and so you've captured this person in an expression where, yeah, like nowadays, from a very young age, people have pictures taken of them and very quickly, you know, decide their own way of responding to a camera. So it's like a perfect little like historical, cultural and political artifact, this entire like body of work that we see in this film.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I agree. the photographs are just the star of the show. Is so good, like, because we see pictures like this all the time. Like in the 80s, there was so many photographers doing work like this, where it's like they go to towns like Glasgow, Manchester, like these kind of post-industrial towns, and take pictures of like kids with bare feet and like dirty faces, and like there was a kind of poverty safari kind of like style of photography that you can go and you can still pick up these books, but these are different, and it's because she's from the community. They don't, these are people, like you say, having fun, kids messing around. It's like not focusing, it's shown like life is tough, but it doesn't feel like an outsider looking in. Because like that's what most photographers would be, middle class people going to these areas, like, and almost like aliens looking at poor people living their lives. And these feel very different. I love the detail how she would give everyone a copy of the photograph and explain why she's taking this picture and how she's going to use it. Like she's actually just making them part of the story, which I think is also makes her completely different from most practices who would be taking similar stuff. So yeah, I think she's like an incredible person. I loved the voiceover. I thought I agree that sometimes like things that use like recreations sometimes don't work, but I thought, yeah, she's a great writer and she's such a powerful writer. But what's so annoying about, because some of these are diary entries and some of these are like letters and things, but a couple of them are like actual, I think, grant proposals to like, I guess, Creative England or BFI or whoever funded in the 80s, and she gives this kind of forceful argument of why she has to make this work. It's about youth unemployment, it's about changing people's lives, it's about how this needs to be documented and recognised and pushed back against, and then it just ends by she didn't get the grant, and it's like it makes you so angry. Who's handing out this stuff? Who could listen? Who could read that application and not think it was important? So yeah, it's a film that makes you angry. It's gonna get a happy story. I love how that her daughter has, she is creating this legacy. She's getting this film made. Sometimes like films where families involved, you think, oh well, you're always a bit skeptical, but yeah, it seems like she's genuinely trying to just get the name of her mother out there. It seems like work is now being shown in the Tate, things like that. So yeah, it's like really important that these kind of voices. I'm sure Tish Murtha's not the only voice, this working class voice who's been ignored over the years. Voices like this are like discovered and being shown to more people, because yeah. I thought that stuff was just.
But like, it's easy as well to forget that it's like family members who are talking about this person in these little like modern moments. Like that, obviously, it's her daughter who is sort of leading this discussion, but like the people she's interviewing are her own uncle, Tish's brother, and like friends of the family who knew them all and stuff like that. But you very quickly forget it because her work is so complex and so like deeply representative of the culture itself that it's not personal to them. It's a cultural thing. Yeah. And the fact that everyone kind of like has their head screwed on right and recognizes her for the artist that she was, even though the whole point of the film is that the rest of the world didn't, is like a really just like gripping way for these conversations to go in.
Totally, yeah. So I think that's a thumbs up from everyone on Tish. That is also released on the 17th of November. That's out by Modern Films. Go see it. In honour of our favourite little freak, Barry Keoghan, who's a horny little figure of chaos in all his films, we're going to be discussing our favourite horny figures of chaos in cinema. Yes, it's a very convoluted subject, but bear with us, people. So
this is going to get the clicks. People are going to want to listen to a podcast episode about horny little freaks.
Who wants to go first on this?
Do you want to go first?
Because
you have the timely one.
Oh, I've got.
I would usually go to one of you, but you're both horny freaks, so it's like,
it's like you're both authorities on horny freaks.
Both equally horny and freaky. So who do I go to first?
I'll go first because this film is out now.
On you go.
So, like, this might seem backwards, but I really like films where you can have queer characters that are also pitiful, horny little freaks. It's like, I guess it's like a triumph, right? The LGBT media is now so vast that you can have these like two ends of the spectrum. Like on one end of the spectrum, you've got like Heartstopper, where it's all very like serene and cozy and everyone's super respectful and kind. And it's kind of that fantasy that, queer kids at home might not get. So it's like, it exists for a reason, and it's part of why loads of people like it. But even though I like it, you have to admit, everyone in that show is such a fucking goody-goody. Like, it's a world where, like, teenagers are these, like, you know, flawless, like, romantic angels. And I was getting desperate for, like, good representation where queer characters have the right to be rampant shitheads. Which brings us to Bottoms, which is the other end of the queer representation spectrum. This is a world in this film where everyone is a freak because it's high school and they're catatonically horny amoebic losers who are like not always in the right, who don't always make the best decisions, but the film really invites you to laugh at them. So if you're not familiar, it's Rachel, is it Seno or Senot?
Senate. I think so.
And the Bears Ayo Edibiri, who are playing two teenage girls who start a quote-unquote women's self-defense class with the ulterior motive of just wrestling with the hot girls. And it's so dumb, but it's like... It is that raunchy teen sex comedy that is for people who are on top of their feminist rhetoric. Like, it assumes you've at least seen Barbie. Like, the male characters who are these sort of, like, you know, like antagonistic football jocks who are stealing all the girls, they are like the men in Barbie. They're a squadron of best friends who are actually incredibly, like, sensitive and delicate and precious, but everyone has to accommodate and privilege them because they're just, like, too stupid to be held accountable for their actions. And those are the kinds of characters that usually dominate the raunchy teen comedy, like American Pie or whatever. But I think it's healthy to have a film that explicitly states that teenage girls are equally awkward, equally horny, and just, you know, massive lunatics about, you know, I don't know, making out with people. There's points where, like, their, you know, sparring partners in this club say, "Stop smiling, I'm kicking your ass," which is like... just the perfect, like, you know, frazzled by horniness teen brain thing. And, like, my favorite thing, I think, is that, you know, the world building of this world where everyone is a freak. So, like, the pretty popular girl that Ayo Edibiri is crushing on has a quote. She's like, I really love it when people use violence and raise their voices for my benefit. Like, that's my love language. And, you know, there's like, with all these films, there's a trope where we have the climactic kiss on the football field in front of the whole school, and the characters are all, like, staring amazed, and one of them says to himself, like, "Oh my God, I'm gay." And another one says, "Oh my God, I'm not gay. I just love gay porn."
I love that line.
And it's just, like, everybody, down to the background characters, like, you know... I went to see it with my partner, and he did not notice that in all of the shots where the school mascot is in the background, it's like a furry sort of Viking dog mascot that just has a gigantic dick. Like, there's like a blink and you miss it establishing shot of the classroom with all the football jocks that are sitting in the background. One of them's just in a fucking cage for some reason, like a go-go cage with his, like, desk in it. But, like, yeah, I mean, it gets really, like, frenetic and ridiculous. There's kids who, like, want to burn down the school or kill their stepdad, and it, like, flirts with that darkness in a very funny way. It's just so unhinged from beginning to end, and I think that's great. I'm excited that, like, LGBT pop culture isn't so sanitized that we can't show queer teens being, like, ravenous, violent little psychos, which they, like, often are. Like, this is... If you've got a friend of queer friends in high school, this is going to be better representation than, like, Love, Simon will be for you.
So true.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed because I did actually try and watch Bottoms last night but my computer wasn't working. It was like some internet problem. I gotta say, I don't know if it was just hard. I wasn't getting on its wavelength. I don't know what was happening, but I could tell jokes were happening. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't laughing along. I don't know what it is. I just feel like I was the problem. But
this is cinema. I think watching it in the cinema
the thing is, like,
fun.
it's been out for I don't know how long now.
Like a week,
I think it's kind of the thing where this isn't the hugest audience, like, this isn't the biggest market audience that they're going to capture, and I think it's already been out for a while. I think that it came out ages ago in America, like, it came out at the beginning of the year in America or something like that. So, like, anyone who wants to have seen it will probably have, I don't know, pirated it or something. So when we went to go see it, it was like us and, like, 2 other people. So I was kind of like, it's you know, an uphill battle, really, because if they tell a joke, you're not going to be laughing with an audience. It's going to be quite quiet. And I admit, like, at the beginning, you do have this sort of feeling of, I can't tell whether or not these characters are, like, just annoying. I can't tell if this is cringe. I can't tell if this is, like, clearly written by, like, older people who are trying to do the whole, like, you know, young trendy teenager thing. but like you do eventually like begin to, especially like as the comedy gets physical as well. It is a surprisingly violent movie with lots of like action scenes, and that really like gets the energy up and makes it funnier. I have heard from some people it's incredible on the second watch. Like, I
was going to say that because the film it reminded me of when I was watching it, I was like, this is kind of like a little bit like, maybe it's because all the jocks wear their football gear inside, but like it reminded a little bit of But I'm a Cheerleader. And I think, and I didn't actually like that the first time I watched it, and now like every time I watch it I crack up because I kind of like, I'm on its wavelength.
And like the thing about these films as well is you're kind of meant to anticipate the joke. Like, you know, American Pie, I'm not an American Pie fan, I don't even know if I've seen it all the way through, but it is like people kept watching that film and it became a reference point. You kept having to reference things, and we're now in this age of raunchy sex comedy movies set in high schools or universities or whatever, where they are in fact like, you know, trying to get away from the really like gross misogynistic goo that like, you know, occupied American Pie. Like with Booksmart, the one that came out a couple years ago with Beanie Feldstein, there's one, I'm gonna double check, I think it's called The Cut, that was on Netflix, and it's about like a bunch of teens who go out on a like camping trip, and one of them accidentally like cuts off his own dick.
Oh, I
don't know if it's called The Cut.
It's not called The Cut. I remember. What is it called? I remember this though. Idea. It's got a lot of the characters. The
package. It's called The Package.
There you go.
And it's really funny, but also like they managed to make a film around dicks, like dicks being the central plot point that is not just like obnoxious and hypermasculine. It's intersectional.
Okay, I need to follow that.
I'll make this brief. So I was trying to think of who my favorite like weird little guy in cinema is, and I would like to make the argument for Mr. Collins, played by, is it Tom Holland or Tom Hollander? I always get them confused.
It's Tom Hollander.
Tom Hollander.
It would be funny if it was Tom
Holland Spider-Man.
Tom Holland Spider-Man, but he is also like an older, boring historian. Actually, I don't know if he's boring. That was really mean. He is a historian. Oh no, I hope he doesn't listen to this.
First Emerald Fennell and now this.
God.
But I always get confused who is who because there's too many of them. Anyway, my point being, Tom Hollander in Pride and Prejudice, who plays Mr. Collins. I think generally that Pride and Prejudice for me is one of my favorite films. I think it is gorgeous. I think one of the reasons for that is that it doesn't just do what I think the 1995 adaptation kind of falls prey to, and that it's just like such a kind of faithful adaptation that there is nothing kind of texturally interesting about it really as a kind of like filmmaking endeavor. Whereas this one, he has, Joe Wright, who directed it, has like a real understanding of like how kind of visual language and kind of physicality and kind of the senses work, and he kind of brings all of that together to tell the story in a way that feels like you're watching a kind of craft happen. And with Mr. Collins' character, he has so many fucking good lines. There's like the thing that I sent you guys on the group chat, the bit where he's like what a well-proportioned Roman, what excellent boiled potatoes. No, these just like fucking ludicrous lines. But also there's this like one bit where he like keeps clearing his throat to talk to Mr. Darcy, who is like the very tall Matthew McFadden, and finally he turns around, he just like has to swoop out of his way to like avoid being like knocked over by him. And there's just like a kind of very like a physicality with which he holds himself, which is like quite tense, quite annoying, like really that sort of, in a similar way to Saltburn, that sense of like someone just glomming onto a group and like not letting go. And he does that like really, really well. And you do end up feeling like really sorry for him. There's like a couple of bits, I think like the camera pans to his face after like Lizzie rejects his proposal. Spoilers for Pride and Prejudice, I guess. And then there's a bit where she's gone to like see him and her best friend who like married him like a few months after, and he is like showing off about the house, and he's being really annoying and really cringy. He's like, I just think it's like perfect and blah blah blah. And as the two girls like walk out, like barely listening to him, and he's like, I just think like anyone would be proud to call themselves mistress of this home. You can just like see his little face, like, and I think there's just something really good about the way that Joe Wright in that film, with him and like with all of the characters, just pays attention to a kind of detail and rhythm of storytelling that I really love. He's just like so weird. It just truly, could you imagine your parents being like, you have to marry him? Could you imagine?
It's been a while since I've seen it, but the thing that I remember most about the Joe Wright Pride and Prejudice is that like the actors, or at least, you know, the main actors, they're always like laughing their way through their lines, which gives it a real like good sense of like these. It is really like flowery, elevated, almost hard to discern language sometimes, but like the fact that they're like giggling their way through it makes them very believable young girls. So the fact as well that you have like Tom Hollander as Mr. Collins, who comes in, and you're right, like he's saying this stuff like, you know, these are the best boiled potatoes I've ever had, and it's like he's reading his lines like he is reading out loud from a book he doesn't understand. You know, and it's this thing where I think he's the perfect foil to Matthew McFadden as Mr. Darcy, who's like, how can you fall in love with someone who's being a dick? But also, like, how can this guy who's being a dick not at all be any amount of threatening to you? And it's because, he's clearly just, like, read a book somewhere about how to, like, be congenial to your hosts and how to, like, properly address a lady or something like that. So he doesn't actually seem that nefarious at all, because he almost seems like he's so desperate to be approved of and to like please the people around him that he's clearly just like following the very explicit script of like social manners of that period. It makes for such an entertaining watch. It's so realistic, it's so believable and like modern, because we know people who like think very hard about how they want to appear to other people.
My mum hates Jane Austen generally, and she especially hates Pride and Prejudice. And one of the things that she always says is like, they're all really horrible to Mr. Collins and they like reject him for being so embarrassing. But then Lizzie gets really offended when essentially Mr. Darcy like says that to her about her family, that he's like, oh, it's like really embarrassing that I'm so in love with you because like your family is so like cringe. And it's like, why is that double standard there? Which I actually think is like one of the tensions, not like the failures in the text. And we've argued about it many times and still. But I think this film like really understands that, right? That like, we know lots of people like that, and we actually have seen lots of people kind of like that within the Bennett household itself. And it's very good at like, this sort of like humanizing while also having it be so over the top, like comedic and funny, and like really digging into just like what are like, he's not chaotic really. If anything, he's like too by the rules. But he is horny. He like really, like that one conversation where he's like, oh, like Jane is like engaged to be married. What about the next sister? but he is like a little weirdo, weird little guy. I love the weird little guys. Anyway, that's my...
What about you, Jamie?
Well, when I started thinking about this topic, I started to think about my beloved screwball comedies, which I know, Annie, is also very close to your heart. Because usually the agent of chaos in screwball comedies is a woman going into a kind of freewheeling, kooky, like off-the-wall woman going into the life of a really kind of straight-laced guy. You know, think of Bringing Up Baby or The Lady Eve, which is what I was thinking of. And even one of my favourite films, which is a kind of like, I guess a kind of inspired by the screwball comedies, is like Something Wild, you know. So it's like Melanie Griffith sort of sends this guy, this kind of straight-laced kind of yuppie off on a tangent. And I thought one I was going to talk about was Barbara Streisand in What's Up Doc. Have you seen What's Up Doc?
Yes, I love that film. I have so many things to say about that one, the man, what's his name? Ryan O'Neal. Yeah. Fucking
talk about horny.
Talk about horny. Also talk about absolutely fucking depraved. Like the things on his Wikipedia page are like not okay.
You know he was like very jealous of his daughter winning the Oscar, Tate O'Neal. Like he was like supposedly didn't speak to her for ages because she won the Oscar.
Yeah, she was like what, like 7, 8 or something. But then wasn't there the thing where he accidentally like hit on her once? Like years later at like an awards set. Like I think he was like just a bit like real asshole. But he is so hot. He's so sexy.
It's those little geeky glasses, you know. And he's always in his pants. It's just always happens.
Oh my god.
Anyway, sorry, I think I got Annie distracted.
Sorry.
the whole the horny chaos of this.
The titular horny freak.
But anyway, Barbara Streisand is fantastic. She plays Judy Maxwell, who's this kind of freewheeling cook who's just a magnet for trouble. she instantly starts kind of like pursuing this geeky professor who's turned up at this hotel with his wife Eunice, who's awful. He's like the most boring job. He's like, what is he? As a professor of rocks. He's interested in how rocks vibrate. He's got the most ridiculous job. And there's this whole crazy plot about tartan bags. He's got a bag full of rocks. Barbara Streisand's got a bag full of pants. And then what else? There's an old lady with a bag full of jewels, and then there's this kind of shady guy with like a bag full of like government documents, and they all get switched around, and it's like a real kind of like caper movie where like, you know, like there's like opening doors. It's very funny. There's a kind of insane chase through San Francisco, which involves going through Chinatown and getting like wrapped up in like a dragon, and like, you know, it's got so many good sight gags. You know, the classic like silent movie gag of the pane of glass. There's like a million of those types of jokes in this film, and it's all caused by Barbara Streisand, who's just like laughing her head off at all this chaos she's happened. She's like basically usually eating a carrot or like smiling or like cracking a joke. She's so funny. And to me, she sums up the kind of like agent of chaos, the horny agent of chaos. So it's basically just trying to get this guy, this hot geek who she also wants to bed and steal away from his wife. It's like, yeah, just like shamelessly, you know, causing chaos. It's causing fun. So much fun. It's by the script I think is one of the best scripts in cinema. It's like written by Buck Henry, who did things like Catch-22, The Graduate, Heaven Can't Wait. Robert Benton also was involved, who did like The Late Show and Kramer versus Kramer. Like tons of like, you know, like Hollywood pedigree. It's referencing a million, you know, it's basically the plot is kind of roughly Bringing Up Baby. That's kind of the reference point, but it goes off in a million different tangents. So much fun. It's got a hilarious court scene at the end. Yeah, it's just a great film. You haven't seen it, see it.
It's so much fun. So much fun. Because it's like after the golden era of the screwball comedy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like so of that genre.
Yeah, so it's directed by Peter Bogdanovich. It's, I think, his third film, maybe. It's straight after doing, I think, he may have done Paper Moon before. I'd actually talked about Ryan O'Neill. So he's probably done, it's maybe his fourth film. I think his last truly great film as well. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And obviously he's like a student of these films. You know, he was like a great kind of critic as well, and he like knows cinema inside out. So he's obviously referencing all these movies that you've seen, you know, Preston Sturges and people like that. But yeah, he just comes up with his own kind of like kooky little take on it, which I think is great.
Yeah, it is great. What a collection of weird films.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think they're all worth looking at. So that's our show, guys, I think.
Yeah.
What we're left to do some plugging. So we are, well, I should say we'll be back in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be running down some of our favourite films of the year. It's actually that time of year, guys, where we're talking about like the films of the year. Have you got your list ready? Have you been checking them twice?
God, we submitted them to you.
That's true.
Have you got my list?
It's another job I have to do. So that's going to be fun once we collate that list. We should also say Cine Skinny will be back in the new year. We're going to be showing I Hired the Contract Killer, Aki Kaurismäki's 1990 film, which is a lot of fun. That's going to be at Summer Hall on 16 January and going to be at CCA on 17 January. Is there anything else, guys? Have we missed anything?
I think that's it.
No, I think that's all good.
I guess all we can say is, Peter, get well soon. Please come back and don't subject people to this, to me.
Don't subject Jamie to himself.
Oh, no. My God. We're back in 2 weeks. Have a good time, and we'll see you again.
Bye.
Bye.